A Swedish climate activist and a shipment of baby formula are suddenly at the heart of a global firestorm. Why did Israel seize a humanitarian aid ship bound for Gaza, risking diplomatic outrage, legal challenges, and unleashing a new wave of worldwide protest? The answer could reshape not just the rules of conflict and humanitarian aid, but also the very framework of international law in the 21st century. To grasp the significance of this event in the Mediterranean, let's start with a quick but essential crash course on the origins and realities of the Gaza blockade. In the summer of 2007, following a violent internal conflict, the militant group Hamas took full control of the Gaza Strip. In response, Israel, citing acute security risks, imposed a comprehensive blockade on the coastal enclave. Egypt, which shares a border with Gaza, joined in enforcing certain restrictions. Their publicly stated goal: to prevent weapons, materials for tunnel construction, and dual-use goods from reaching Hamas, which has carried out repeated rocket and mortar attacks into Israeli territory over the years. But over nearly 2 decades, this blockade has had far-reaching consequences. It has severely limited the movement of goods, fuel, medicine, and people, contributing to dire humanitarian conditions for the more than 2 million residents of Gaza. According to the United Nations, over 70% of Gaza's population is now dependent on humanitarian assistance, with unemployment rates among the highest in the world, well above 40%. Electricity is rationed to just a few hours per day, clean water is scarce, and hospitals face chronic shortages of essential supplies. International law adds layers of complexity to this already tangled picture. Israel maintains that its blockade is lawful under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, which enshrines the right to self-defense. Israeli officials argue that, as Hamas is considered a terrorist organization by Israel, the United States, and the European Union, the blockade is necessary to prevent weapons smuggling and new attacks. However, critics, including numerous human rights organizations and independent legal experts, counter that the blockade constitutes collective punishment, forbidden under Article 33 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. They say it unduly harms civilians, violating the principle of proportionality in warfare. This legal debate is not new. In 2010, the world witnessed the deadly Mavi Marmara incident, where Israeli commandos stormed a Turkish aid ship trying to breach the blockade. The result? 9 Turkish activists killed, international outrage, and years of diplomatic fallout between Israel and Turkey. That event still shapes how flotillas and their interception are perceived today. Fast forward to early June 2024. A vessel named the Madeleine, operated by the grassroots Freedom Flotilla Coalition, set sail from Sicily. On board, a diverse group of activists from across Europe, including the globally recognized Swedish climate campaigner Greta Thunberg. Their cargo was symbolic but essential: food, baby formula, rice, and medical supplies intended for Gaza's besieged families. According to the coalition, the ship was intercepted in international waters, about 100 nautical miles from the Gaza coast. The Israeli government wasted no time in responding. Defense Minister Israel Katz took to social media, stating unequivocally, "No vessel will be allowed to breach the naval blockade." He accused the activists of acting as propaganda spokespeople for Hamas, signaling a policy of zero tolerance for any attempt to challenge Israel's tight control over Gaza's borders. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir instructed prison officials to isolate the activists upon arrival, denying them media access and, reportedly, showing them harrowing footage from the October 7, 2023 Hamas attacks, perhaps to underscore Israeli fears and reinforce the government's narrative. Human rights lawyers and international observers painted a very different picture. Francesca Albanese, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Palestinian territories, called the interception a blatant violation of international law, insisting that breaking the siege of Gaza is a legal duty for states. Huwaida Araf, a prominent human rights attorney and Freedom Flotilla organizer, argued that Israel's actions defy the International Court of Justice's binding orders, which require unimpeded humanitarian access to Gaza. The stakes in this confrontation are immense. On the Israeli side, the government points to undeniable security concerns, intensified by the devastating events of October 7, 2023. On that day, Hamas militants launched a surprise attack that left over 1,200 Israelis dead and led to the abduction of 250 hostages. Since then, Israel has waged an intense military campaign in Gaza, resulting in the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinians. According to Hamas-run authorities, the death toll exceeds 54,000, though there is no clear distinction between combatants and civilians. Israeli officials warn that relaxing controls on Gaza's borders could lead to renewed violence, weapons smuggling, and further loss of life. Yet, humanitarian agencies paint a grim picture of life inside Gaza. Since March, Israel has drastically limited the entry of aid trucks, citing concerns that Hamas diverts or seizes humanitarian supplies to support its fighters. Olga Cherevko of the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs stated bluntly, "The only way to alleviate the suffering of the people in Gaza is through an unencumbered, unfettered, and unrestricted flow of aid." Aid organizations warn that the population faces a spiraling hunger crisis, with food insecurity and malnutrition rates climbing to record highs. Some agencies have even reported the first cases of child malnutrition deaths in decades. But the Madlene's journey was fraught with danger even before the Israeli Navy arrived. In a dramatic episode that went largely unreported, the crew rescued 4 Sudanese migrants from a sinking dinghy in the Mediterranean, offering food, water, and first aid. This act of solidarity highlights the often overlooked humanitarian challenges that span the entire region, from North Africa to the Middle East. Then, during the interception itself, Israeli forces reportedly sprayed the vessel with a white, paint-like substance, causing eye irritation to at least one activist, according to the Freedom Flotilla Coalition. Once in Israeli custody, the activists were isolated, denied access to journalists, and shown distressing video footage, an attempt perhaps to justify Israel's harsh response and frame the activists' actions as dangerous provocation rather than peaceful protest. Meanwhile, diplomatic tensions are escalating across Europe. Countries such as Germany, the United Kingdom, and France, historically close allies of Israel, are now openly criticizing the conduct of the war in Gaza. These governments are debating sanctions, including potential trade restrictions and arms embargoes, to pressure Israel into rethinking its approach. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry has called for immediate international protection for the Madlene's crew, echoing demands from human rights groups and legal experts. Even Turkey and Iran have weighed in, condemning the interception as a violation of international law and, in Iran's words, piracy on the high seas. With the United Nations and the International Criminal Court signaling their interest in investigating possible violations, the legal and diplomatic repercussions may reach far beyond the waters off Gaza. Human rights organizations are urging the International Criminal Court to open investigations into Israel's blockade tactics, alleging breaches of maritime and humanitarian law. If these calls gain momentum, the world could witness a landmark legal confrontation, one that pits national security imperatives against the universal principles of humanitarian access and civilian protection. At the same time, the Madlene incident is galvanizing activists and civil society movements around the globe. Inspired by the defiance of the Madlene's passengers, Francesca Albanese has called on every Mediterranean port to send aid boats, declaring, "United, they will be unstoppable." If this call to action is heeded, future flotillas may set sail from ports across Europe and North Africa, raising the risk of more confrontations on the high seas. Social media campaigns in support of Gaza are gaining traction, with tens of thousands of people sharing images, videos, and personal stories from the flotilla's crew. The diplomatic stakes are enormous. If Israel's hardline stance results in further violence or injuries, even its most steadfast allies may be forced to reconsider their support. Any future escalation, such as another deadly incident at sea, could trigger a full-blown diplomatic crisis, shattering alliances that have lasted for generations. On the other hand, sustained international pressure could push all parties toward compromise. International agencies and major powers have begun floating the idea of monitored aid corridors, with the United Nations proposing an expanded observer mission to guarantee the safe delivery of humanitarian supplies. Such a mechanism would require delicate negotiations, balancing Israel's legitimate security concerns with the urgent humanitarian needs of Gaza's civilian population. What does all of this mean for you as a viewer, and why should you care beyond the headlines? At its heart, this crisis is a vivid lesson in the intersection of geopolitics, international law, and humanitarianism. It is a case study in how economic blockades, trade restrictions, and access to technology can be wielded as instruments of power, or potentially as tools for peace. Gaza's experience reveals that, even in an era of instant communication, digital fundraising, and satellite imagery, Physical barriers and political decisions can override the best intentions of activists, aid workers, and ordinary citizens. For anyone interested in global economics and technology, the Gaza blockade demonstrates the profound impact that control over the flow of goods, data, and people can have on entire societies. It reminds us that economic policy is not just about numbers and trade balances. It is also about human lives, dignity, and the choices made by governments in times of crisis. The blockade has crippled Gaza's economy, stifling entrepreneurship, cutting off access to modern technology, and forcing skilled workers to emigrate or abandon their professions. Meanwhile, Israel has faced mounting international criticism and economic costs, including the threat of sanctions and a decline in foreign investment. Technology, too, plays a crucial role. The current crisis is unfolding in real time, with activists live streaming from their ships, governments monitoring movements via satellite, and journalists relying on encrypted messaging apps to communicate with sources inside Gaza. Yet, despite these advances, the basic humanitarian challenges remain unchanged. Food, water, medicine, and shelter cannot be delivered by tweets or hashtags. They require physical access, international cooperation, and the political will to prioritize human lives over short-term strategic gains. As a viewer, you have a unique vantage point. By digging deeper into the legal, economic, and ethical frameworks shaping events in Gaza, you gain insight not only into this conflict, but also into similar crises worldwide, from the ongoing war in Ukraine to the humanitarian disaster in Yemen, from the isolation of North Korea to the economic collapse in Venezuela. Knowledge, as they say, is power. In today's interconnected world, informed citizens can play a vital role, pushing for accountability, supporting reputable aid organizations, using digital activism to amplify marginalized voices, and challenging simplistic narratives that dominate mainstream debate. So, let's return to our central question. Was Israel's interception of the Madleen a necessary act of self-defense, or a dangerous overreach with the potential to unravel essential norms of humanitarian access? The answer, for now, is both uncertain and fiercely contested. Early indications suggest a tightening spiral of confrontation. More aid ships are reportedly preparing to sail, while Israel vows to maintain its blockade at any cost. Yet, history teaches us that moments of greatest risk sometimes force the world's leaders to seek new compromises, forging unexpected diplomatic breakthroughs amid the chaos. And here's a secret detail that most mainstream headlines missed. Before its interception, the Madleen's crew rescued 4 Sudanese migrants stranded in the vast Mediterranean, a fleeting but powerful moment of solidarity and humanity in an otherwise bleak and polarized landscape. It's a reminder that even small acts can have profound ripple effects, inspiring hope and empathy where politics and power have failed. If you found this deep dive revealing, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for future updates on global economics and technology. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Can humanitarian activism break political deadlock, or will security fears always come first? What innovative solutions would you propose to ensure aid reaches those who need it most? Let's keep the conversation going, because